there's a lot more guys that we can talk about now, which is what I really like to do. And I kind of dove into it a little bit of who the Chiefs could look at in the fourth and fifth rounds. But Jordan, I really want to dive into it more with you. On Arrowhead Report, I wrote about it right when the picks were released. But now let's talk about this fourth round pick, because at 145, there's a lot of different ways the Chiefs could go with what they do at 145. Obviously, we say this every time. Depends on how the board falls. Depends on free agency. I'm sure you guys are tired of us talking about that. But at 145, Jordan, what are your initial thoughts where the Chiefs could go with it?
Well, Tucker, I think it depends on how the board falls and what happens. No, I'm not going to go there. And it really does. Like, I mean,
Yeah, it
we say
does.
that a lot, and it really does depend on all that. But man, just looking at the board, and shout out to the database for tracking the risers and fallers, because we were
Mhm.
talking before the podcast. There are so many guys who are going way up and going way down. So those preliminary evaluations, I don't know if they're going to withstand the test of time as we approach the draft. And I think that people kind of get too caught up in round grades for the draft and what people give each other. The if the You have to look at the traits, you have to look at the scheme, you have to look at the fit with those guys. Like, you could have a guy who is a fourth round grade get drafted to a team that really suits his skill set and turns out to be probably like a second round value. So that's something worth keeping an eye on. But in terms of guys who really have that true value in the meat of the draft, Samorion Terry is an example. He's a guy that we bring up a lot as probably second round talent wise, maybe even first round. He was touted as a first round pick as
Mhm.
little as a year ago. So he's an option. I thought Tommy Tremble, but I really don't think he's going to be there at the end of the fourth round. I think at the end of three, it's possible. What do you think about Tommy Tremble?
It's interesting because I actually had Tommy Trimble written down as a fifth round option.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so I think that he could be there for sure. Uh, I know a lot of people like Tommy Trimble, and especially in Chiefs Twitter, his name is starting to get used a little bit more than it has been
Yeah.
in weeks past, and that's just how it goes. Everything goes in ebbs and flows with these draft prospects. So maybe by the time the draft comes around, it's going to depend on his pro day too. I know that's another thing that we say a whole lot is it depends on their pro day, but I think that Tommy Trimble could be around there, and I mean I already spoiled that he's one of my fifth round guys that I have on there, but yeah, I like Tommy. I mean, we all like Tommy at this podcast.
Yeah, and I just checked the database. He's at 187. So he's a guy who
Hmm.
very well, in terms of the database at least, could be there in the fifth round. I think,
Yeah.
man, I forget whether I gave him a late third or early fourth round grade. I think that it really depends on his fit with certain teams. Like, if you're the Chiefs and you use your third or fourth round pick on a backup tight end that can also serve as an H back, that's okay. But if you're looking for, if you're a team that needs a starting tight end right off the bat, Tommy Trimble's probably not your guy. You probably want to go with a
Hmm.
Brevin Jordan or something else. So to build off of that, in terms of guys that can make instant impact and guys that can kind of be stashed away, um, I want to stay on offense. I picked Ben Cleveland as a
Oh yeah.
probably fourth ish round pick. My thing with him is he's a power run scheme blocker. He doesn't move extremely well. He's such a big dude. Like, he weighs over 350
Oh yeah.
pounds at the Senior Bowl. So he's a guy that probably a fourth round pick. And then Quinn Miners, I feel like we draft him every single time we do a mock. I think
Oh yeah.
everyone does. He's just one of those studs that stuck out at the Senior Bowl. So those two, in terms of offensive linemen, were options that kind of piqued my interest. I was going to bring up Brady Christensen, but I really think he's a third round pick.
I think so too. And you and I kind of had that conversation before we started about, Christensen's one of those guys that if he goes at the end of the third round, really, if he goes at the beginning of the third round, I won't be surprised at all. I
Sure.
think that he's got the talent to do it, and he can hang with the big dogs, even though he went to BYU, maybe not got as much attention as a Liam Eichenberg or any of those guys out there. Him and Spencer Brown, I think, are two pretty solid
Mm-hmm.
tackles that could go on offense. Well, I'll stick on offense with you here. I'm looking at a couple wide receivers. You mentioned Scary Terry. I've got Josh Matterbebe on here. He's really shot up the draft boards as well. We were taking him, I think, seventh in our mock draft. Our mock draft
Mm-hmm.
1.0 had him in the seventh round. Now he's looking at a fourth round pick, could be staring at a third round pick. He's really been shooting up these draft boards, and it's got to be the training videos, right? I think that's getting him up the draft board is these training videos. You see him do his 72-inch box jump, and that's a big one that jumps off the video off the screen to you. And another one I have is Daz Newsome. Now, I haven't dug a whole lot into Daz. He's over there with Diami Brown, too. That Notre Dame offense is pretty salty. They got one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC, and I know that's with Trevor Lawrence, too. They got one of the best quarterbacks in the country there at North Carolina. So I don't know a whole lot about Daz Newsome, but what I have heard about him is he does good things, and he's going to be right in that range where the Chiefs could get him and probably hang on to him and make him a project wide receiver.
Yeah, I think that that's always a viable option. And Daz Newsome's a fine football player. Amatter Bebe is on my list, and I think that he's always going to be on my list just because he's such a fun player. And
Right.
not to toot our own horn or anything, but I think we were a little bit early on him compared to a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people. Now, it's easy to be early on those guys with insane athletic talent like Josh Bebe has. That dude is a freak.
Right.
And I think him or Tamorion Terry or even Daz Newsome, I need to watch some more of him. When I went and watched UNC, I was focused on Diami. So I
Mm-hmm.
need to kind of focus on Daz. Um, I think he's a projected fourth rounder as well on the database, which is
Yeah.
nice. So that's an option there. To jump over to the defensive side, I have three edges, but I wanted to list a defensive lineman and a linebacker. I have Osa Odigizua from UCLA along the
Mm-hmm.
defensive line. I think he brings a lot of juice to the table. He's a hard worker, kind of a versatile guy that can play a little bit of everywhere. And then Charles Snowden from Virginia. He is an athletic freak. He's a huge linebacker that really needs some refinement, I think. But because of that, it's going to make him a day 3 pick.
Yeah, I've got some guys on the defensive side of the ball too. I'll stay on the line because I got a couple of edge rushers here. Peyton Turner's a guy that we talked about early. We talked about Peyton
Yeah.
Turner pretty early too, and this is a guy that I think if you take with a comp pick is a great value pick, especially in the fourth round. We had another conversation, prior to the podcast saying we don't know why he's fallen because he's a good player. Everything on tape looks good. Ellerson Smith is a guy I know he comes from UNI. I think he's a little bit smaller. I don't know his numbers off the top of my head, but it's something that the Chiefs could look at it in terms of an edge. But that's who I have kind of there. I got Bobby Brown as well. I think the D lineman from A&M. Is that right?
Yeah.
I thought that was true, but I shouldn't doubt myself. That's the only time I'm wrong when I doubt myself. But Bobby Brown is a big boy on the defensive line. And always good to get throw another guy in that defensive line rotation.